CO2 in our atmosphere was at 280 parts per million. It started to surge in the 1950s. This past September, it was at 391 parts per million. CO2 emissions rose to 3.2% in 2011 to 31.6 gigatons, with China leading the way, the US a close second, India, Russia, and Japan to follow. Scientists figure we can add an extra 565 gigatons of CO2 into the atmosphere before we warm the planet an extra 2 degrees Celsius. At this rate, in just about 16 years, we'll blow past that limit. With every mile we drive, 1 pound of CO2 goes into the atmosphere. Deforestation is responsible for more CO2 than all of the world's cars, trucks. Hi, David.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm hot.
Yes, you are. For all the world's cars, trucks, trains, and planes combined, half of the world's forests are now gone. In December, BP shut down its solar division. Shell shut down its solar and wind efforts in 2009.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep talking about these dirty fuels. I know.
So hot.
The top 5 oil companies made more than $1 trillion in profits since the millennium. There's simply too much money to be made in oil and gas and coal.
In order for CO2 to be dangerous, it has to exceed at least 15,000 parts per million.
For thousands of years, the CO2 in our atmosphere was at 280 parts per million.
Cloud coverage affects temperatures more than CO2.
Started to surge in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Don't leave me again, please.
I won't.
With every mile we drive, 1 pound of CO2 goes into the atmosphere.
Warmer temperatures will cause an increase in the reproduction rate of North American lizards.
$1 trillion in profits! David,
Yeah.
what kind of car do you drive?
I'm Prius.
I knew it! That's so eco-friendly. $1 trillion in profits!
Higher levels of CO2 in the atmosphere will produce bigger heads of lettuce.
Half of the world's forests are now gone.
Earth Day is Vladimir Lenin's birthday.
It's also Morton's birthday and the founder of Arbor Day. $1 trillion in profits!
By the year 2049, we'll see an increase of corn and soy production in Canada. Big ass lettuce. Hot. More corn.
Higher, baby.
Hot. Corn.
Higher.
Hot. Corn.
Higher. idling your car, you sent 25 pounds of crap into the atmosphere. Oh, I'm gonna offset you. Yeah, I'm gonna offset you by raising monarch butterflies.
I'm gonna offset you too. I'm adding a hydroelectric turbine to my toilet to make electricity.
I'm gonna offset you by skipping the stir in my coffee.
Whenever I wash my hands, I'm gonna flick the excess water on my houseplants. My Save the Earth chewing gum will offset you. I'm gonna play with my eco-conscious architect Malibu Barbie in her 5,000 square foot glass cantilevered eco-conscious greenhouse with bamboo floors, low-flow bathroom fixtures, her pink Vespa, and her pet giraffe. You know how that glass isn't thermally efficient. Architect Malibu Barbie has to look out at her ocean view. And those bamboo floors won't last with high heels. Malibu Barbie walks on her toes. Right. And doesn't that computerized closet reinforce excess consumption?
Damon, what are you doing over here?
I'm eating whole wheat, aluminum-free, organic pancakes until he decides to shut off that car.
That one organic farm offsets 117 cars.
a very hard time understanding where all of this anti-science sentiment is coming from. But somehow, when we talk about global warming, we don't have to worry about the science. We don't have to worry about what the leading experts and scientific institutions all over the world are telling us. You never have 100% certainty about anything. And if you wait for 100% certainty on the battlefield, so all our good intentions could be for vain. In fact, we could be doing just the opposite of what the people who want to save the world are saying. You could indeed, you're quite right. You never have 100% certainty about anything. Madam President, I have a very hard time understanding. Very hard time understanding.
That's the system. That's the ecological system.
My message, I think, is that the evidence is sufficient. I'm an answer paleontologist, and I'm a lot harder to convince than just looking at a computer model urgently.
I think it's mainly just like little kids locking themselves in dark closets to see how much they can scare each other.
The evidence is sufficient.
And there's a lot of confusion in this.
You never have 100% certainty about anything.
I felt outraged, but I didn't scream and I didn't cry. And I need to.
Every time you turn your car on and you burn fossil fuels and you put CO2 in the air, you're doing the work for war. Absolutely. That's the system. That's the ecological system.
It's plant food. Say that again. Carbon dioxide is what? It's plant food. It's plant food. Yeah, it's plant food. Yeah. Without it, all plant life and therefore all life that is.
I think we find ourselves on the wrong side of science and therefore in a losing position.
The earth will end only when God declares it's time to be over. Man will not destroy this earth. This earth will not be destroyed by a flood. Are we not taking away plant food from the atmosphere?
I would also point out that CO2, carbon dioxide, is not a pollutant.
Bill Dwyer, Connie Grad, Walker Merriman, and Ann Browder take the tobacco industry's case to the public. They present the cigarette manufacturer's point of view to live and broadcast audiences throughout the country. The Spokesman's Program is a face-to-face communications effort which began in 1975. Its public relations objective is to bring a seemingly closed subject back to the level of controversy in the public's mind.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Zach Wittenberg. To my right here is Carrie Hansen, choreographer and artistic director for the Seldons. Let's give a hand to the dancers for the work that they just did. And today we're here for Dancing With, Not Around the Issues. And the complete work from which you just saw an excerpt called Exit Disclaimer, Science and Fiction Ahead, and a previous work that Carrie did recently called Stupermarket, are both really terrific examples for me of dance theater, contemporary dance theater, that addresses complex issues that are relevant today, that exist in the real world, in ways that reflect their complexity, the multiple factors involved in the stakes for different participants in various debates. And because we've got a great program today that's really tight and we got a lot to get through, I just want to get right into how your latest piece addresses climate change. And as far as the title is concerned, can you explain what the words exit disclaimer reference here, and why the subtitle Science and Fiction Ahead?
Well, much of my research for this project was done online, about 3/4 of it, and that process itself really changed the focus of the piece from doing a work about clean energy and maybe America leading a sort of, global direction towards implementing and inventing clean energy, towards a piece that was more about the debate around climate change itself. And that shift really happened when I started to just do more research and reading, and I started to become aware of how extended the argument was by a number of different interests, the questions of who is talking, who is doing the talking, who was funding that conversation, and who was paying attention, became sort of the focus of the dance work. So exit disclaimer refers to, you've probably seen it when you're about to link out from the site that you're on to a third-party site, and the original site doesn't want to be responsible for the information that you're about to find. And that really struck me. I found that very compelling, because much of what my experience was doing the research was that you can just keep linking. That's the kind of online experience, right? You can just keep linking out and onward and not even finish where you were. So that path is really kind of a wild path. And along the way, you hit upon these sites that may provide very dubious information, or other sites that are really legitimate science. And sifting through all of that was kind of the confusion of it, and then led to the science and fiction ahead, because I felt like much of what I was finding was either sheer opinion based. Yeah.
And we see that reflected in throughout the piece, but especially in the excerpt that we just saw, where there's a collection of people here stage right, and the spatula, which is being wielded sort of like a microphone, and there's a really sly and subtle way that the work kind of talks directly to these questions of sort of spin, or of the kind of the redirection of discussion and argument about climate change. And I was really fascinated when I saw the piece in its entirety at the Dance Center of Columbia College recently, how the work itself doesn't sort of suggest that these debates are sort of neat and enclosed conversations that deal solely in facts and figures, that a huge part, and you might say a majority of the conversation as a whole, is about these politically charged decisions about where the nuances are, and how people are sort of shaping and framing information that's out there about these topics.
Yeah, I started, one thing that I often do in taking on a piece like this is to sort of visualize different sections by drawing circles and having the circles kind of be overlapping spheres, which represent different strands. And one of the things that I did here was to just think about who was doing the talking. And so, comedians are bringing this into their bits. I came across a really sort of outrageous bit by George Carlin, who was explaining why climate change doesn't matter, and counter that with what Stephen Colbert may be doing with the material. So it's fodder for comedians, and I certainly did read a lot of what politicians are saying. You heard from Bernie Sanders, the independent Vermont senator, who is pretty outspoken on the topic of climate change, and against Shimkus, a downstate Illinois senator, who brings in a different sort of religious point of view in looking at it. So comedians and politicians and the military, and you started to hear all of those voices in the sound design for the piece.
Yeah, it's something we were talking about earlier with regard to this piece, and with regard to the sound design and the way text is handled by the dancers in the piece, is this idea of noise, right? Mm-hmm. And that you wanted to make sure that the piece reflected the noise that's a part of this conversation, mm-hmm. In addition to the elements that are sort of clear or mutually agreed upon.
Mm-hmm. And I think to a certain degree too, then, the dancers often say, we become a little confused in this piece about who we are, we don't really work with character, but who we are in any particular section, and they flip around a lot. And I kind of I kind of like that idea that there is this own internal noise where I might think about something that I can do, a small measure that I can take, you know, to offset my own my own carbon footprint. And I think that that noise happens on the individual level, and then, of course, the public level.
And it's an elaborate sort of internal negotiation with your own relationship with climate change and sort of the degree to which, you know, every one of us sort of makes or doesn't make specific hard and fast decisions and changes in our behavior in order to, you know, do a small part to alleviate, you know, the effects of consumption. And consumption being something that also runs as a thread throughout the piece as a whole. The dancers, you just saw them eating some pancakes while they were performing. Elsewhere in the piece, they eat frosted chocolate donuts.
There's a lot of eating. They eat donuts, they eat bananas, yeah.
This pairing was really resonant for me of, you know, watching dancers eat as part of their performance, which is not something that we usually do, and sort of in the broader common imagination isn't something that dancers do ever. And this kind of brings me around to a way in which, for me, the piece echoes Supermarket, because, you know, as we discussed about that piece, which was born originally out of a duet called Thrift, which you made in 2009. That was about, in a broad sense, the financial crisis, which at that point was still very fresh and very raw for all of us. And you know, when you're talking about that piece, you discuss how the idea of economy kind of came into the work and in the rehearsal studio. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what economy means to you in a dance context.
Yeah, well, I teach modern dance technique and have for some time, and the principle of the economy is something that's really important to me to work with my students, where you're working with a sort of muscular efficiency, and that you substitute certain things like spatial intention and clarity of spatial intent, and think about where you're going rather than, you know, using a lot of muscular effort. And so, you know, thinking about efficiency, thinking about simplicity, and how those notions of economy really contrasted with our experience of what was happening with the economy, where there was a sort of opacity to it. It felt very complex. It felt mysterious, and so I was interested in those two different, for me, you know, the experience of that word, and so we began with just a simple duet, and then I started bringing in Paul Krugman, so much of my research for Supermarket came through Paul Krugman, and then I started wandering into the sort of, you know, neoclassicist argument and the new Keynesian argument, and those two opposing different camps of economic thought. And for me, and I'm not an economist, but it really seems like our country is really divided along those lines in a broad stroke.
And then from that duet Thrift, sort of, that begat this Supermarket project, along with another piece that was a shorter work that you were working on at the same time, called Death of a Prada Salesman, in which we see a lot of the type of usage of text by the dancers and comedy that you just saw in the Exit Disclaimer. So you know, let's keep rolling along, and let's maybe see a little bit of Supermarket. This premiered in 2011, is that correct? So we're going to see an excerpt from that. Is there anything just briefly you want to say to introduce what we're about to watch?
No.
All right, let's just watch it.
Nice job, pal. $5.
Twice the scrap, twice the cost. Nice job, pal. For $10.
Half the slap, half the price. Not so great, pal. $2.50.
Nice job, pal. With a booty shake.
$10.
Pow Pow Palin.
$5. These bullets go really far. $14.
1 pow, $1.
Less speed, less cost, $3.
Slow-mo punch. $7.
Chin chuck, $1.
Where's my crotch? $7.
My leg doesn't go as high, $2.50.
Voguing Merce. $8.
Merce with the dip. $7. High couture mouse swipe, $9.50.
High couture mouse swipe. $1 because I'm hungry.
Hello, goodbye. $8.
Hello, no goodbye, $2.
Goodbye, $1.
Hello, goodbye, bye. $5.
Just dance, $5.
Just, no dance, $6.
Sexy dance, $8.
Just dance with a song. Just dance, it's gonna be okay, $10.
Crash of 10. $7.
Less crash, less cost. Crash of 10 for $3.
Not much of a crash, $1.
Sneaky Fosse, $6.50.
Flashy Fosse, $7.50.
A jazzy Fosse for $10.
Indifferent Fosse, $8.
Scoopy back slap, $5.
Slappy playback, $3.
Sleepy hunchback, $4. Whoa. 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 $8.50.
Whoa, $1.
My nose itches. $5.
My nose itches. $8.
My nose itches, bitches. $11.
My nose
itches.
$15.
$20.
My nose itches. $25.
No! My nose itches! $50.
My
nose!
My. I.
My.
My.
I.
I.
My.
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 I.
I.
My.
My.
Ma.
My.
Ma.
My. My. I. My. I. My. I.
In the past year, the unemployment rate reached its highest level in 26 years. Nearly 6 million Americans lost their jobs.
The economic jam we're in has topped even the Great Depression in one respect. Never have we had a recession this deep with a recovery this flat. People in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who thought they'd done everything right, earned a degree, stayed with their company, saved for retirement. Unemployment has been at 9.5% or above for 14 months.
49, 50, 51, 52.
Congress extended unemployment benefits to 99 weeks.
55, 56.
But now, for many Americans, 99 weeks have passed and there is still no job in sight.
60.
Some have taken to calling themselves the 99ers.
63, 64, 65,
66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99.
Again, the Seldums. So, again, that was Supermarket. That was a selection from that piece. And this sequence that we saw kind of in the middle of this excerpt that was just performed really resonated with me when I first saw it. When the dancers start stage left and they begin demarcating sort of the simple shape of a house. And then they sort of pass it to the next dancer, who then marks it in space just a little bit larger. And by the time it sort of reaches stage right and the last person in that chain, you know, she's caught between this. She has an impossible task. She has to make the house sort of larger than her body can kind of accomplish it. And that said a lot to me, sort of in a really simple and sort of eloquent way, just about how the issues of sustainability are sort of wrapped up in all of these conversations, and how appropriate it is to use dance and to use human bodies as the location of a conversation about these issues. And so, you know, going back a little bit earlier than Thrift and Prada Salesman and Supermarket and Exit Disclaimer, were you making much sort of issue-based or issue-oriented work before? And if not, if your work was sort of different in sort of the earlier years of the Seldums as a company, to what would you attribute sort of a shift in your artistic process?
Yeah, I did make one other sort of issue-based piece called Monument. It was in 2008, and it was about landfills and trash and consumption. And so I do think that the subject of consumption and really kind of the questions of, who are we as Americans and looking at our lifestyle and how do we define wealth is something that really interests me. And certainly in terms of the means that I have to talk about those questions, we can use space. And so demarcating space and taking space is, I think, something that keeps kind of coming back. I can also talk about the spaces between bodies, and proximity then is something that we work with a lot too. Prior to this piece in 2008, Monument, I was making work about other things. I think that the trajectory of my kind of interest as a choreographer, and I've been making dances for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years. I started out just being really interested in movement itself. And so I paid a lot of attention to movement invention and really trying to develop a rather, I use the word peculiar vocabulary for each topic.
Okay.
I also have been interested in doing site-specific works. We've done a dance in an outdoor pool. We did a dance in a big warehouse garage space. And I think I just kind of keep collecting all of these interests and values and continuing on. I've done a lot of collaboration with visual artists. Exit Disclaimer, this work that we just premiered at the Dance Center, featured collaboration by a painter named Anna Koons, and she created these large set pieces.
And that brings up a good point too, and one last kind of topic that I want to make sure that we touch upon before we open up this to questions from the audience and a larger conversation, is that at the same time that using dance as an expressive medium allows you to sort of place ideas in the context of an individual human body and sort of use one body as a vehicle of expression for these ideas that exist sort of outside the body itself, or sort of in a larger sense. There's also, in working with an ensemble, there's a necessity for sort of mental and physical cooperation, that even in sort of staged representations of conflict, like a stage fight, everyone still has to sort of work together, even though the thrust of the image is one of conflict. There is cooperation that's necessary to sort of pull that off. And so I was wondering if you could speak also to sort of what makes choreography for an ensemble and working with bodies in partnership and working with artists from other disciplines, how that might be appropriate for addressing topics like these.
Well, this group of dancers has been working with me for a long time, and I think that we've really come to a great place of being a sort of a family, a community. There are all of those sorts of things that enable us to work together in a deep way that communities also need to thrive. There's certainly a lot of trust. There is an understanding of shared values, and they understand my values, and they know how to bring those to the stage. It's a very collaborative art form. I don't make up all of the material. We make it up all together, on the spot, and we negotiate one another's weight and one another's strengths, and design it, and then it's kind of a moving target. It keeps changing too, and so it's a live performance.
So, for example, in that section with each sort of short dance movement having a name, having a nickname, and having a price, the dancers themselves contributed those elements of that section?
Yeah, that was actually a fun process. It was kind of a long process. We behaved like a market. Help me remember how we did this. I had them each go away and develop products, which was basically a dance move. And they had to then send that to the sort of marketing department. And so they had to give it a name. And maybe the movement wasn't that great, but maybe the name really sold it. And so then they determined a value that they were going to sell it at. And then we all decided what value we would purchase it at. So I was trying to, recreate a marketplace or something. And then we did variations on those products, and it just got dense. That's what happened there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny to me that the products themselves are sort of inherently untransferable. It's you know, like someone's selling something that they're doing with their own body, and kind of it's where it begins and ends. And there's this interesting sort of dissonance between the larger frame of that marketplace and its sort of logical impossibility.
Yeah. Well, I was really interested in trying to point up the absurdity of valuing pricing things, you know, and then there's also a sort of one-upping that happens there a lot, which also then happens with the kind of my I section.
Well, I want to make sure that we leave some time for any comments or questions from you on the House today. Thank you all for joining us, and I'm really glad that you had a chance to see Carrie's work and to see these dancers perform. So if anyone has any questions, there are 2 mics here downstage, and you know, please feel free to come and ask anything of anyone.
I do. I'd like to ask the dancers, how much does the meaning of the dance matter to you when you're dancing?
Do you mean actually when we're performing, or when we're making it?
When you're performing.
I think something that kind of contributed to the question you just asked too is like how we all came together. I think that these people are the hardest working people I've ever been around in any field, and I think that's something that we all share together. And also, I think we really, individually and together, we all really stand on things that we're really passionate about, that we believe in strongly. And that comes into the room with us and then helps the creative process. And then also on stage, because we have all danced together for 5 or more years. I just realized I've been dancing with Amanda in class for 10 years. So it's kind of, we share that same language, we share that same drive, that same passion, that same work ethic. And I think then on stage, we can kind of just live in the moment of that. That we're not necessarily driven by the issue or the cause, at least for me when I'm dancing. I'm driven by the people that I'm around and the movement. Is anybody else?
Well, I will say that when I get to yell at the imaginary car, that hits home for me. I try to be as much in the moment as I can, because in real life, that's how I feel. But that's all I have to say about that.
I think when it comes to issue-based or topic-based work that Carrie has been doing, knowing the background information and a lot of the research that we do is really helpful when performing it, because it informs how you're performing it and how you're actually doing the movement. So it's not that you're just coming out here and doing a phrase because that's what Carrie told you to do, or that's what we developed. There's a context behind what you're performing and how you're performing it, because we're trying to relay that information to the audience. And so I think it's really important for us to know that sort of information and know the context behind it, because otherwise it's not going to translate and you may not understand what we're trying to relay to you. That's my personal.
Thanks, Bruce.
Welcome.
One thing that I think I heard Carrie say, I don't know, I was changing my clothes really rapidly earlier, and I heard a few words that they were talking about earlier, but Carrie said we really don't play characters very much. And that's really true with a lot of the research that we do. We're all, we try to stay as informed as we can between our very hectic schedules, but we have these ideas of various personas and people and lifestyles, and we meet those with who we are. And so even though we may shift quite a bit and our roles may shift in various works, there's still a piece of us in every role that's there. And so it's not that I'm thinking about being someone else or something else. It's just kind of a different aspect of who I am, and maybe something that doesn't get brought out very often.
Other questions? Yes.
I love the sort of shifting narratives as the stories go along. The you know, just like the talk of the economy, or even the sustainability, the complexity of the it's all the different voices and how you shift, the dancers shift in position and everything. And you guys are clearly a sort of big part of the local Chicago dance scene, or whatever connection with Columbia. But I'm curious at the same time, in the sort of reactions in the art world, And like, who do you see as your sort of contemporaries? Like, your peers? Do you see yourselves as like a dance group, or do you see yourselves as sort of a kind of a fuller sense of a sort of performance? Because it seems to me that it borders on performance art in a way that's a little different than a kind of classic dance question. So I'm just sort of curious where you position yourself in that and where you see yourselves in those worlds.
Well, actually, I do.
Philip, would you hand Carrie the microphone?
Oh, am I not on? Oh, done. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. I actually am interested in calling us a dance company, but expanding the idea of what dance is and to what dance can speak to. My home is dance, and my interest is still in physical, not myself, my knees can't do, but in physical movement. And I get really charged up when I see, the lines and the form and still all of that physical action. Yeah, we're starting to delve a lot more into language, and I just feel like I need to have as many sort of delivery systems as I can. So spoken word, objects, sometimes we work with video, to make it more concrete, to make it more specific to the issue that I'm trying to cover, whether it's about, landfills, or whether it's about the economy and the crash, or whether it's about climate change. But I still want to just, my challenge is always that I'm not just slapping some movement vocabulary, some dance vocabulary that is generic across every topic. I still really need to infuse the movement with the meaning of, the meaning and the complications of the issue.
So, and if I can just interject and piggyback on what you just said, as someone who covered as an arts journalist the Chicago dance community for a number of years here, this sort of cross-disciplinary, sort of multi-channel approach to dance making and to this broader definition of what is contemporary dance and what does it contain and what disciplines does it draw from is something that's very sort of in a broad sense specific to the Chicago dance community and just sort of what has evolved here specifically in terms of the difference between what is dance in Chicago, what is dance theater in Chicago versus in other parts of the country. And I think it's something that, that makes being involved in the dance community here very exciting and very fulfilling. And I think we're all very fortunate that the Seldums are a part of it and that you are all here today and part of this conversation. So thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Do we have one more question maybe? Do we have time for one more question? One more question.
I'll just quickly say you're all so talented, and I found it just so emotionally rewarding and deep in your movement, and the combination of the speaking and the movement with such intent made it just so much stronger for me to get your message. So I thank you. And I have one silly little question, but that bubble gum. Yeah, what was your interpretation of what were you more deeply trying to say about the bubble gum and putting it in your mouth? Wow. Did you really? Almost.
I just needed to have them blowing bubbles and to refer to the housing bubble. That was, my kind of gimmicky way of getting there. But then I also, when we started chewing the gum, I realized that there's something just about the chewing of the gum in a sort of voracious, physical way that I think, you've all chewed gum. You know what that is. And we spit it out in polite company, and when we're having civil discourse, and when you're on your own, you're like, and so there's something about that I just wanted to get at with this notion of like taking and greed and
gum chewing is also kind of like a strange form of sort of aborted consumption, right? Like it's like the first part of eating, and then you kind of don't do the second part. For me, there was something in there too that resonated with the topic. So. Great. Well, I think.
And I love it when Amanda has to then go around and clean up the mess, right? I thought that was important too.
Dirty work. Yeah. All right.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.